Sheriff, how are you today?
Morning.
And tell us a little bit more, perhaps not necessarily about this incident here, but the moments after the call gets reported in that Officer Dyson died while en route. I am assuming there is something that comes out over the dispatch that there's been an accident or a collision.
Sure, at some point, when it's determined, it's they're going to put out at 911. Somebody called in 911 and said, obviously, a vehicle collided with something, and I don't know how it came out on their radio system. That's deeply concerning. We've talked about this time of year is tough for everybody. It's a tough. I watched the thing this morning on TV. It said that most stressful time of the year is right now. And you think not, but it is. And a lot of calls coming in for service on domestic circumstances. The tensions run high, and deputy was en route to that location. And from best what I could see on TV, the reporting person from the sheriff's office said it may have had to do with hydroplaning. We just talked about that the other day. Remember you asked me about driving conditions. Says it's slowing down. Very challenging when you're at night. You're driving and you're on your way to an incident, and you catch something like that, and how devastating that can be for anyone. And just a few years ago, unfortunately, our deputy was not seriously injured. But we had a very similar circumstance a few years ago when one of our deputies responding, a place where the water was running across the road, and hit that and went over and rolled the vehicle. So for us, they mentioned Deputy Kent Mundell that went to his service, and I go back to when we had the Lakewood 4 and everybody in between. Pierce County's had a really rough last few years. I've been to each of those services up there. And it's always in your mind when you're out there working. I think of this young man. It's very young when you're 25 years old. Child on the way. We all think about that greatly in that individual, and what it took for him to get to this point. You take your written test. You got to make a decision to go do this, and then you have to take your polygraph, your background, your psych, and then you've got months and months at the academy, and then you've got another year out on the road. And what it took to get to this point, and what a tremendously dedicated person it was, and now we suffer another loss, and it's been really tough this last couple of years.
When you hear that there were 2 officers already dispatched to a Parkland home, does that mean that they perhaps were already on scene assessing the situation, or how would that work out that it would necessitate another?
What I heard on the news report was that they were calling for other units to a location, and I don't know what the circumstances were, but when you're somewhere and you hear another trooper or deputy or officer calling for second units or additional units for assistance or for help, they're not calling because things are going well.
Right.
I mean, they're not. Usually, when you hear a call for a second unit or something, there's something definitely going on, and it's not good. And when you've been the one standing there and you're waiting for other people, you're hoping your friends get there soon, because it's not going well. And I've been on both sides of that, when you're standing there waiting and when you're en route to a location. And we try to remind everybody that it's more important to get there than it is to get hurt on your way there. But it's tough. You're doing the best that you can out there. Everybody's trained in doing driving and defensive driving and those kind of things. But also, that when somebody's calling for your assistance, they really need that. And it's for some of us, and I'm not sure where this was in Pierce County, Mason County, same way. County sheriff's deputies and state troopers oftentimes are a long ways away.
Yeah.
It's a long run to get to somebody, and minutes in those situations they count. And in this situation, this happened. It's just tremendously tragic for the family and for the folks in law enforcement as well.
If you go to a call here in Mason County, is it normally a deputy there by themselves, or is there a second deputy that is with them? I know that it's not usually 2 in the car at a time, but you'll get the initial call, and is that one person will go out, and then if they get the sense that something may be amiss, or after the initial interaction, they need to call for that backup. What happens in that situation with the officers who may already be on scene? Do they go back to the car?
Whenever the call comes in, the dispatchers just do a super job of a first assessment of why we're going there, whether it, somebody got their mailbox knocked down is one thing compared to some type of a disturbance. And generally during the time that you're en route there and the dispatch has them on the line, they're talking to the people in the house if it's a disturbance and getting an idea of what's going on there. At the same time, oftentimes those dispatchers are talking to you, and they're running information on that residence if there's a past history of violent activities or something there. And as that call comes out, everybody else is listening to the radio, and no matter where you're at, generally, if you're not tied up immediately on something, you're starting to move that direction. You hear the officer or the deputy that answers up for the call, and somebody, the second units, will start moving that way. But as you know, in our county, with only a few people out at night, and we get more than one of those disturbances, you can be on one disturbance and somebody else is on another one, and there's not enough to cover them all. And it's really challenging when you're by yourself. And it's hard when people say this, but the smarter part sometimes is to not go in. You just wait till somebody gets there, because it's not going well anyway. It's going to get a lot worse sometimes, and people will say, well, you always go in. But I'll tell you, when you're going into something when you're by yourself and people can get around behind you or something, it's not good officer safety to do that, and you're waiting for other people to get there. Oftentimes you'll make an initial contact, and if you know that people are right behind you, but it's really challenging, and if you ever been out and ridden before, most of the time things go pretty well. Life is pretty good. You're going to calls, handling calls and things. But if you've ever been out there riding and you have that call and you're with somebody, people get a little bit edgy. And oftentimes when we used to have riders, we'll have to drop a rider off depending on where we're going.
Oh, wow.
You take them to the nearest store or something that's open in the middle of the night and get them with somebody else. And then go to calls, because it can get out of control real quick.
What is the origin of the black? I mean, I know what it means. It's kind of like the mourning, kind of like the black armband right across the badge, the black tape.
I just know it to be remembrance of when somebody to black out the badge to recognize that person. Thanks for noticing. You notice mine's a tape this morning is because it's a cloth badge, but everybody will have those on until after the service, remembering. Another thing I bring up that's it's an interesting thing. Friday, I was at a local business, stopped in to buy a newspaper and dressed the same uniform. And I got out and started to walk to the store, and I saw a car pull in and two guys get out. And I see them both, I can tell by the way they look. They step around the car and they look over the top, and the guy looks at me, and I realize who it is. It was a retired lieutenant from the state patrol that I used to work with, and another guy that I didn't recognize, but immediately I recognized them both, that they were former law enforcement. And he just looks over and he says, "You okay? Everything okay? You need anything?" Immediately, as soon as they saw me get out of that car, and they were there for something else. And it turns out they're both work for another organization now, and they were in plain clothes. But as soon as they saw a uniformed deputy, get out of the car, it was like, "Hey, is everything okay? Can you use anything?" I just came back from Anchorage, Alaska, and my son and I were going into a business up there, and as we looked, we saw the Anchorage police pull in. And there's, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 Anchorage officers pulling in, dealing with a guy that's obviously highly intoxicated. He's out of control, and he's creating a disturbance in this mall, I guess you would call it. And we step back on the side and say, "Hey, we're going to be observers here. I know you're watching the outside perimeter, because you don't know who's going to come up behind on those officers." And those young people were being so incredibly patient with this person that was just beyond human comprehension, how they were dealing with this individual to try to calm things down. It was not an easy circumstance, but just walking out clear from another state and watching them, and you're kind of standing back watching the crowd around to make sure they're going to be okay too. It just goes on, because it's a very dangerous time in our business. These driving issues, would go back to what we talked about a week or two ago, just reminding that you can get on that water, you can come across going down the highway, and either it's a puddle just to the side of the road or just in your lane that catches you and pulls you one way or the other, or you hit that stuff and you're right up on top of it, and your car's out of control really, really quickly. And that happens to everyone out there, and especially this time of the year, the troughs in the roadway. southbound I-5 south of Tumwater used to be horrible. And those troughs fill up from the big trucks. And, your car wants to stay right in it, but you'll hydroplane right out of them too. So
just a reminder, when you see those flashing lights come up behind you in your rearview mirrors, and be always cognizant of those types of things. Perhaps a little easier to recognize them when it's dark out and you see a blue and red flash or a red and white flash, but get over as far as you can, as soon as you can, and don't try to, cut back in or go around people like they're...
Oh, yeah.
I know I've invited you out to a program that we're doing at the end of January to understand the importance of that. This particular program that we're putting on has to do with the train crash over I-5 and the importance of getting emergency services there immediately, and why you're trying to get there quickly, that minutes do count sometimes.
Yeah.
And then that same thing, and you'll see during that presentation what it's like to being in the car when people aren't getting out of your way, or they're slowing you down or impeding traffic, or they're pulling to the left instead of they're going to the incorrect place to get off the roadway, or they're just slowing down in front of you and not moving over. It doesn't help, and it's really important to move to the right when somebody's behind you.
What's the kind of etiquette or protocol when you're coming around, let's say by the Shelton Marina and stuff, where there's like no edge there? I've had that situation where I don't want to do the wrong thing, but I kind of slow down without fully stopping, because by the time the lights are on you, your reaction time is pretty immediate there.
Which, reminder there, we've had a couple of bad accidents just in the last month or month and a half, or bad ones right there. What we ask you to do is there's a lot of guardrails along that road right there, and there's a few places where you can pull off safely. Just get to that next location where you can pull off safely and move over, or get right up against there. If there's nothing coming, stop. One of the challenges is on Highway 3 that's been for years, it's very curvy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And people will slow down, drive really, really slow through a curve, but we're not going to pass you on that curve until we can see down that straight stretch like anybody else. And so when people go really, really slow through a curve, but they just don't pull over, it's tough to get out and around, because you don't want to pull out. We can't see either.
Oh, sure.
And so when we go to do that, just get to that spot, and we really ask you to stop if you can, because if you're just rolling slow, then we've got to worry about that and oncoming cars and everything. There's a lot of things moving on there. Fire the same way. Those big trucks don't slow down easy, and they're trying to negotiate through a traffic or an intersection, an ambulance, and especially when it's dark and rainy out. And I've noticed that Spencer's much more tired this last 2 days, because he's had these 2 extra days or a little bit longer to be outside working. And I've noticed it.
That's it.
He's noticed that extended days, and he's out there tired out this morning.
That's it. Mason County Sheriff Casey
Thanks.
Salisbury. It's always good talking with you, and we'll be around next week if you want to be here next Monday.